I was, I think, 6, I had a friend. I was in kindergarten, first grade actually, and my friend and I would always go and play in her basement where her brother had his ham radio equipment, and my father was, I only realized later on, somebody who also wanted to become a radio engineer. So the war prevented that, and he had started in City College, which in those days was, a big deal to get in. But the war interceded, and then life interceded, and he had to support first his widowed mother, and then his own family. So he never really finished his studies, but he always was a gadget guy, a geek guy, and always with stuff that had to do with communication. So it was audio visual. We were the very first people, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we were the very first people to have a Revox reel-to-reel tape recorder. And, and he just loved to work with those kind of technologies, and he did beautiful documentations. So he recorded so many wonderful, he recorded my mother telling wonderful stories, and that's the transition. So I started thinking, no, it's all my father, all this love of technology, his love of digital stuff as soon as it came out, his love of video, his love of computers. He bought the first Apple, in the early 80s. Like, he got it first before I didn't. He was all excited. He came home. I'll remember thinking, this man is so excited about word processing. Like, he was really excited. But what I didn't get until I went back after our conversation with Marge and had a really good thing was that, in essence, one can be an amalgam of one's parents. And it wasn't really just my father. And certainly if I think of myself as being somebody who is either as a coder or a technologist, that's not really who I am. Who I am is a storyteller. And that part I got from my mom. And the idea of what we're doing now with social media is that perfect amalgam of the technology and the storytelling, of the community and the science. And that's lots of fun. Again, referencing back to Marge's piece, what was really sad is that I was pretty convinced as a child who grew up in the 50s, as a young child growing up in the 50s, that math and science were going to be really challenging. And in fact, when I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do that math and science that would enable me to be a doctor. There wasn't that obstacle to working with a profession that was writing or journalism. But it's so interesting that as I grew older, the stigmas that I'd created for myself around what I could or couldn't do started to fall away. And I think I was about 30 when I took a business math class and also took my first computer programming class. So it's like 28 years ago. And
what was your first computer programming class? Just curious.
Assembler.
Hardcore.
Well, there's an introduction, and then there's assembler.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of coding in assembler, and then I couldn't understand why this was so easy for me and why I really loved this. And it was very fascinating. Like, how can this be?
I thought it was supposed to be hard.
Yeah, I thought this was supposed to be hard. And the other thing was probability, logic, and statistics, and those are things that I really liked. So it was a kind of, I was already almost middle age, and it was kind of a revelation that, these are things that are fun. I think it's all about finding the right environment. I actually was very blessed in that my husband and I decided after having one child to move to a kibbutz. So we were living in a cooperative. And there I could be an IT director and have a big family and see my children during breaks and be participant in their lives and have a job.
What's being an IT director on a kibbutz like?
Very eclectic. So in our kibbutz, which was both agrarian and manufacturing, we created the Brita, the plastic casing for the Brita, and we also
created filters?
Yeah, the water filters. So you know that. So we were dealing with manufacturing companies and resellers that were large companies in Europe and the States, and also we created some kind of a cap for fuel tanks. So we had to meet very high ISO standards, and we understood very early on, transition from being agrarian. The programs that I first wrote were about tracking the incubator capacities for the hatchery, or what the dairy farm produce was like. So it was all very based on agriculture or livestock. And then we gradually transitioned to putting a lot of focus on, as a community, I mean this happened while I was there, to a more industrial way of producing. And so very interestingly and early on, we started to buy very state-of-the-art equipment, and people had to run that, and they weren't sending technicians down into the Negev desert to service the AS400 and whatever the precursor was that I was working on, that's 360. So I sometimes had to roll up my sleeves and, open up the physical hardware and get my hands in, because the technician would be, giving me kind of instructions remotely. But on well, I actually was running away from some terrible environmental problems. They put the National Hazardous Waste Dump literally in our backyard. So after 5 years of a lot of grassroots evangelical work around making the public aware about the dangers of not properly safeguarding the site, I kind of decided that it was enough exposing my kids to the chemicals, and we came to the States.
And you started working on the SAP community right away?
No. When I came to the States, I had a friend here that during the time that I was in the States studying assembler in Copal that I had met, a couple actually, a woman who's American. Her husband is French, Moroccan, Israeli, American, and he said, you might want to be checking out. Might want to be checking out this company, SAP, or you might want to be finding out a little bit more about what they're doing. And he actually helped send me to a SAP Education Training Academy where I studied ABAP. And he also had me go and interview for a large telecommunication company where I worked for a year as a consultant in their expert center. And while I was there, I started getting calls from SAP Education, would you like to come and teach ABAP for us? And I'm thinking, I only have a year experience, I don't know about that. And they said, well, we'll train you, and we'll get you more experience as being an instructor. And with my friend's blessing, I made that transition. And I've never looked back since.
Your current role, you like to title yourself community advocate. That's on your Twitter bio too, so it must be important. Can you tell these people that are watching what's important about a community advocate? Why do you love that title?
Yeah, because when we talk about evangelism, I always think about people on soapboxes who are ranting. And although I'm probably capable of doing that, and probably capable of talking a lot, I would much rather see myself as somebody in the community who's listening to not just, but of course, customer needs, to input about our products, to suggestions and advice about how a community can be more productively run. That's one side. But advocate also means that, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, that sometimes you find yourself being the amplifier voice of the disenfranchised. And
I love that.
I think disenfranchised covers ageism, sexism, racism. We're a ecosystem of a lot of cultures.
Isms.
What?
Of all the isms.
Of all the isms, perhaps, and maybe, amplifying the voice of the disenfranchised doesn't mean a protest voice. It just means making sure that people who might demur, as I like to say, have more focused ability to be visible and make themselves heard.